There he is, our football and TSN insider, Farhan Lalji. Let's start with the Canucks. Farhan, what's going on? Just kidding. You know what we're going after. Why? The tweet about
I like it.
The tweet about short yardage quarterbacks and our boy Tommy Stevens. The floor is yours. Make sense of that for our listeners.
Well, look, first of all, I do want to apologize to Tommy because, first of all, I don't know Tommy. I wasn't there to disparage Tommy, and my opinion is not based on Tommy. So I made there were a couple things I tweeted that were responses to someone else's suggestions, and I probably misread some of their suggestions and responded in a way I shouldn't have, and I deleted the tweets, not because I was trying to run from them. It's just that I didn't want to make this about Tommy. I just didn't. And I know in Saskatchewan, we always talk about the rider persecution complex, right? So, they don't like how we're running short yardage, and now we're winning, and they're trying to legislate what we're doing because everybody's against us. And that's just not what this is. I believe this league's got to be in a position to develop quarterbacks. And I don't want to see a trend where 9 of 27 quarterback spots are potentially, and they're not now, but 9 of 27 quarterback spots are potentially taken by guys that teams don't believe will ever be a solution for them at the quarterback position, right? And, I think Calgary went through a bit of an exercise, and, as effective as Tommy was, they kind of knew he wasn't going to be that guy for them. When you look at the Saskatchewan situation, he's actually not their number 3 quarterback. He's their number 4 quarterback, right? I mean, if they had a bunch of injuries, Jack Cohn would probably be on the field as a full-time quarterback, ahead. But, the problem is you say something like that and now people say, you think he sucks. I didn't say that. Like, this guy played Division I football. He started games at Mississippi State. Like, he's had some success in the sport at a high level. It hasn't necessarily worked out for him as a starter at this level. So it's not like I'm sitting here trying to take his job away. This is not about Tommy Stevens. So while I apologize to Tommy, my opinion on the issue hasn't changed. And to be honest, I know there are governors and GMs that share my opinion. Obviously, Jeremy O'Day's not one of them. But, this league, the drop-off right now in most places, Saskatchewan not being one of them, the drop-off between starter and backup is massive. Like, it's as big a gap as I have ever seen in my 30 years around the league, which is more than many CFL players that are opining on the topic, right? So I want to see that change. And it's hard for teams right now because of what's going on in the States with NIL and things like that. Like, I remember having a conversation with Dave Dickinson. This was back when Tommy was still a Stampeder. And again, it wasn't about Tommy. It was just about the issue of the drop-off at backup quarterback and what we can do to potentially develop more. And he told me at the time that there were teams that actually felt like they were just bringing in a specialist because it was hard for them to get a legitimate third quarterback option, somebody that they were excited to see and develop. Right. And so that's the problem, right? Like, what do we do to get more guys up here? We need to get them up here. We need to get them rostered. We need to get them on the field. We need to find ways for that type of player to be furthered, right? So that's kind of where my opinion is coming from. It's not about Tommy. I'm not trying to disparage him. And I know he was a valuable member of the Riders. So, I apologize to him. But again, my opinion on the topic, not the player, my opinion on the topic isn't changing.
So my question to everybody when they talk about we have to develop quarterbacks, there's a worldwide shortage. Like, it's not unique to the CFL, right? The NFL's got the same thing. If you get into the second guy in lots of NFL teams, he's just as terrible as my Aunt Agnes. So the point being...
Great lady.
She's a nice lady. Nice, raises lovely lilies. How do we go... What does this quarterback development thing look like? Everybody talks about it all the time. What do we say? The second quarter, you got to play your backup quarterback?
No, I don't think that. But, like, look, when this whole concept of players coming onto the field to replace the starter began, it was around the 80s. I remember here in BC when we had a guy named Tim Cowan that would come in for Roy DeWalt. I remember when Damon Allen came in for Matt Dunnigan in Edmonton and things like that. And I don't know that that's necessarily the development model, but I think there's a lot of layers to it, right? Like, for example, the CFL got rid of passing camps around a decade ago because of the cost involved with that. And that, not everybody could do that at the same level. Maybe we need to go back to that. Maybe we need to find some sort of OTA model and things like that in the offseason. Maybe we need to take quarterbacks out of the cap and raise their salaries so that a rookie quarterback coming into this league can't make under $100,000, right? Like, we need to find ways to incentivize recruitment at the position and development at the position. And you're right. Like, I don't have all the answers for what it needs to look like. we are seeing more and more where these guys are getting the opportunity in preseason. We've got fewer preseason games than we had, let's say, I'm trying to think of what year the league went from 4 preseason games to 2. And it's difficult to go through 4. The NFL is finding that out right now, shrinking their preseason schedule to 3. But, could you even get combined practices, right? Where 2 teams just, they get together like they do in the NFL. Like, are there other windows there where you can create evaluation opportunities? Because it's not only the development piece, it's evaluation. So how did Saskatchewan get their quarterback? They went out and got an aging quarterback who's established, right? Like, let's go through the laundry list of quarterbacks that came into a team and had a development path, okay? Davis Alexander, Nathan Rourke. I'm waiting.
You're going to wait a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, you go back to Bo Levi Mitchell. When the Calgary Stampeders brought him in, they had a development path that in year 3, he's going to be our starter. And this is what we need to do. We need to get a stopgap around it. But, back then that organization had such cachet and they had so many, great quarterbacks coming through the system that they were afforded time and patience. Now in this league, everything's about today. Whoever was last year that missed the playoffs, next year is going to be expected to win the Grey Cup in their fan base. You know what I mean? Like, we don't get the opportunity to develop. So coaches are on the hot seat and they feel a level of pressure to do it now. And so we take shortcuts. Right, so everybody's going out to try to find guys that maybe were developed elsewhere, and now we can get them in. So the only way to get a chance to play is if someone in front of you gets hurt. Do you know what I mean? Like, would Nathan Rourke have even got the opportunity he got if Mike Riley, if his elbow was totally messed up in training camp and he couldn't even get a rep, right? So Nathan got all the reps. It was like Nathan and Shea Patterson, and the choice there was pretty obvious, right? So, it takes extreme circumstances for most quarterbacks to get an opportunity. So you need to see them get evaluated before you can even see them get developed. So there are things like that, can we create more practice opportunities, game opportunities? Like when I say game, I mean preseason games. Can we do the camp thing, with the off-season passing camps? Like there's things that they need to invest in, and ultimately it's going to cost money. And in the case of organizations, it's going to cost a level of commitment. Okay, so let's real quick, I'm going to digress to the NFL. Okay?
Yep.
Brock Purdy. Everybody talks about how people missed on Brock Purdy and things like that in San Francisco. You know what happened in San Francisco? Kyle Shanahan is one of the most respected minds in the National Football League. And John Lynch knows that if I fire this guy, it'll take him about 30 seconds to go get another job. So he has juice and clout in that organization. So when Kyle Shanahan comes to training camp with the final pick in the draft, Mr. Irrelevant, and he goes to John Lynch and says, hey, this guy is better for what my needs are than the guy we just traded a ton of draft picks for the previous year. Here it is. Do what you want with it. And John Lynch is like, all right, I better listen to this guy. You know what I mean? And those situations are so rare in this sport because everybody has to win today.
What other pro leagues, I'm trying to think, and I don't think there is one, that would do this, that would say, okay, we need to start developing goaltenders. Like, you think the league is to put people in the stands to win games, to win championships. I get what you're saying. How many people would be on board for that? Because it's like, now we're talking development, right? We're almost talking like minor sports to an extent.
It's a fair question, but also understand that all the other sports have minor league models, right?
Yeah.
The NFL doesn't, but they've got the NCAA, right? So in our league here, we've got to look at it that much differently, is that we've got to, okay, we're trying to pick their guys off. Then there's the odd unicorn in youth sports, but it's rare. You know, Trey Ford hasn't worked out yet, and we've not seen Taylor Elgersma. So again, like, we're waiting for that guy. We're less and less likely to get, the second tier. There was a time where, the athletic quarterback that the NFL wasn't looking for came to the CFL. Well, now the NFL is looking for that guy. So there's so many layers to it. So for the CFL teams to identify a team or a player, recruit them, and make sure that, they want to come, one of the other problems is the neg list. Right? Like, if you go look at every team's neg list, there are so many quarterbacks. There's teams with a 40-man neg list that have 10 players that are quarterbacks. That's insane. Take every quarterback off the neg list. Have your neg list, but no quarterbacks. So if the best quarterback's available and 3 teams want to bid on him, great. Because if you bid on him and instead of paying 75, you're paying him 100 to get him up here, you're more likely to invest practice time in him and really get a good look at him and put him on your development path, right? So those are some other things that you got to identify, not only the uniqueness of skill set for this league, but interest and availability, right? So, baseball has minor leagues, hockey has minor leagues. You can cut your teeth. Even the basketball has the G League and the D League or whatever it's called right now, but football doesn't have that. And the NFL has it to a point with the NCAA, and now you're going to see guys in the NCAA stay longer because of all the NIL money, so they're developed more. But if those guys have made $5 million of NIL for a couple of years, they're not coming to Canada.
Is it cyclical? No. Is it cyclical to a point? Because you kind of go back, and I'm trying to think. Watching with my dad on CBC back in the '80s, and it was like there wasn't who got brought in. Like Tracy Ham, I felt always was the guy, the short yardage. Is it cyclical, or is it going to take some sort of rule changes here? Because in basketball, right? When's the last time we saw a 6'9" guy that all he did is rebounded and put it in? Like that game changed. Are things going to maybe change eventually and evolve on its own, Farhan, or do you think there needs to be changes to kind of things that you're talking about?
No, like you need a plan, right? Like you either have a plan or you have hope, and hope is not a plan. So
that's what I told my financial guy.
Yeah, me too, right? Like we're living that. So. When I looked at some of the suggestions I talked about, you've got people at the governor level and coach, the coaching level that are far more advanced at this than me. But there are ideas there. There just has to be a commitment, and sometimes with commitment comes cost. But there's education, there's more promotion, things like that. Like there has to be a commitment to making this happen, because right now everybody thinks micro. Very few teams think macro, and as a league they've got to start thinking macro on this particular topic, because everybody knows it and people kind of touch on it in dribs and drabs at these meetings, but nobody comes away with a concrete plan. And I'm telling you, like, you've still got Trevor Harris and Bo Levi Mitchell and Zach Collaros, who are late 30s, Trevor 40, and they are among the gold standard, and I love those guys, like every one of them. But, which of those teams has the next guy in the queue? Is it Jake Mayer? Is it Jack Cohn in SAS? We'll see. They're closer to a solution than most. Excuse me, I'm just getting over something here. Is Taylor Powell going to be that guy in Hamilton, or is somebody going to take him? Because I think there's interest in Taylor Powell league-wide. You look at... but you go around the league and look for where the backups are, and there's a lot of concern league-wide, right? Like Winnipeg doesn't have a plan B. Taylor Algersma, if he comes here, he may get an opportunity to get to number 2 soon, but I don't think he's got any interest in coming anytime soon. So they got to find ways they've got to find some solutions and commit to a long-term plan for the benefit of the league, not individual teams. For
a guy that coaches and your kids playing, and you watch so much football, and you're covering it as well, and you go back to the Nathan Rourke example, and I'm just sitting here wondering, like, if that's how it went down, where it's almost like fluke that he got in and we see what he can do, is that a bit of a scouting issue as well? Because you guys are talking about the shortage of quarterbacks, but then we just talked to Dante Myers that played at 2 schools we'll never hear of. There was quarterbacks there. Is it like a scouting? Because there's got to be athletes out there, or am I wrong?
Yeah, look, I think it's all of it, right? And to be truthful, like, while you can say there's a shortage in both leagues that you guys were saying earlier, the other side of it is that quarterbacks are training at a higher level than they ever have before, right? Like the advent of 7-on-7 and private quarterback training, and like I said, like you said, my son's a quarterback, and so like I live this side of it. There are guys out there, but it's just now they're moving so much more than they ever have, right? Like quarterbacks at the collegiate level, they're constantly moving up and down levels, and if you don't get a chance in the next 1 or 2 years, you're not going to develop. You're just going to move on into the portal. And so, you've got to track these guys. You've got to find them. You've got to find a scouting network. But I think the league needs to take a collaborative approach to the issue, as opposed to everyone figure your own thing out, right? I think the league needs to go out, and whether it's a quarterback committee that goes out and finds 20 guys that they think are, talented and interested and available. And, kind of eliminate the neg list process a little bit and just go look at these guys. Do you want to have just quarterback combines or camps for these guys that maybe aren't going to get an NFL look, but are going to be right there at the next level? Like, I think that there needs to be just a focus on that position, because it's so critical. And, you mentioned the Lions thing. When Nathan Rourke came out of college, he was not a refined passer by any stretch of the imagination. He was much more of a running quarterback. And honestly, the best thing that happened to Nathan Rourke was COVID, because during that COVID year, he got together with Rob Williams, a quarterback coach, and developed a significantly higher level of velocity than he possessed when he left Ohio. So now you have his natural work ethic and intellect and acumen, couple that with now new arm and the legs that he already had, that additional year where he was able to buy time. And then, Mike Riley shows up and his elbow's not ready for camp. Like, a lot of things kind of went in together. Some of it's serendipitous to make that work for him. And not everybody gets that opportunity, right? So some guys you get a couple of reps in a practice and then that's it. People have moved on. And that's just the reality of pro sports. So is there another mechanism to get those guys evaluated before they get into these buildings?
So you talk about the development part, and we'll use Drew Brown as the example in Ottawa. He gets a chance to play, stumbles, gets injured, maybe doesn't have as much success they want. Because it's a business and they want to win, right? They've got to figure that out quickly. They're developing Drew Brown. Is it the way that Drew Brown wants to be developed, or is it the way that the Ottawa franchise wants him to turn out? To develop, you have to lose. Do you know what I mean? You can't start at the top and develop. To develop, you've got to come from the bottom. Is that, Davis Alexander, even he was on the roster in Montreal for a couple of years, right? And got some playing time behind McLeod, Bethel Thompson, etc. before he became a bigger player. So I think part of the development model is you got to lose, and teams don't want to lose.
Well, yeah, but like Drew Brown did get those opportunities that you want when he was in Winnipeg, right? Mm-hmm. He was behind Zach Collaros on the depth chart. He got mentored by him. He learned from him, and the offensive staff that were there. And then eventually when Zach had some injuries, he got enough of a small sample size that Ottawa said, okay, kind of he's that next guy, right? That he's got a few games, so the game itself isn't going to be too big for him. We'll take a shot on him, right? That's kind of how Mike Riley got in the door, right? Some injuries, you get a few games, and then you kind of elevate, and he goes from BC behind Travis Lulay to getting a full-time opportunity in Edmonton, and some guys hit and some guys don't, and Drew hasn't hit yet because he's had injury issues in Ottawa. Now he's going to get Ryan Dinwiddie, and Ryan Dinwiddie is as good a play caller as there is in the CFL, and when you look at what Ryan got out of Nick Arbuckle, I think he can get a lot out of Drew Brown. So, I think Tommy Condell was a very good offensive coordinator as well that he had there previously, but Dinwiddie might be a better fit. Who knows, right? To get the most out of him. So we're going to find out real quick this year in Drew Brown whether or not he is that guy, right? Because if if it doesn't work out for him under Ryan Dinwiddie, then do you go back to being a backup? I don't know, right? Do you eventually circle back to Winnipeg and think that's a better situation for me? And when Zach Collaros retires, then maybe I go there. Like I don't know, but you kind of get a couple of these windows to do this, and once you get to play, you kind of get two windows to do it, and if you don't, then teams are going to view you differently.
Getting a lot of text messages over the last couple of days, Farhan, and I want to get your take on contract lengths. A lot of people messaging in saying we need longer contracts for these guys. I don't think it happens. I don't think it's strategic business-wise. What would be your take on maybe having longer contracts in the CFL?
Yeah, I think it's good, and I think the last CBA incentivized that a little bit, and with the guarantees on the back end that not many people have gotten. But and to be honest, I'm impressed with the number of teams I've seen re-sign their free agents in the past month that have signed them to 2 and 3 year deals. Mainly 2. There's been the odd 3-year deal like Katzentonis and Hamilton, but most of them have been 2-year deals. But it sure beats all the 1-year deals we would get every year, right? And I think players are also realizing that there isn't necessarily a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? So if you can get a little bit of certainty, I think the players want that too. And these contracts, they've all got outs if you want to go try the NFL. Everyone wants to, in many cases, renegotiate before their final year anyway. So, I think it is slowly tilting in favor of the players in that regard, which I think is a good thing. But the more 2-year deals I'm seeing, it encourages me for sure, because I do think longer is better.
I agree with you. They're not guaranteed, though. They're not like NHL money or baseball. So football contracts aren't guaranteed, but it gives your organization a little more of a view to the vision or view to the future, if you will, if they're signing guys for 2 years.
Okay, we got about a minute and a half here. What else are you pulling from the winter meetings that's intrigued you?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, the two things that we talked about, and truthfully, I really hope that at some point they modify the 3 minutes, the final 3 minutes. I know the final 3 minutes are not going to be what they've been to this point. And I think there's a way there where you can still go with the play clock, but started at a different time. So like the big fear is, no lead is safe. And then, if you get a first down, then you can run 35 seconds off 3 straight plays. And that means you can kneel out, a minute 45, which nobody wants. So I do think that there are some tweaks you can have to the new timing rules in the final 3 minutes, which still allow for those comebacks, don't allow you to kneel it out. I wish that had gotten more conversation this time around, and, it didn't. But I think once the coaches next year get used to the new play clock, I think they'll be more open to adapting the final 3 minutes as well, because I want comebacks. I also want urgency. And right now, in those final 3 minutes, I still see a lot of checkdowns. I still see a lot of huddling, and I'd like to see a little less of that in those urgent moments.
Work in progress. That's what I'm kind of hoping for as well too.
Yep.
We didn't even get to chat. We didn't even get to talk NFL. Maybe I'll have to text you. Give me some insider picks.
I'll be at the Seahawks. Listen, this is a kiss of death. I'll do something I never do. I pick the Bills. So I'm picking the Bills this week, and picking the Seahawks, picking the Rams. What's the game I'm missing? Houston and
the Patriots.
Yeah, I got to pick the Patriots.
Oh,
you're taking Buffalo. You have been sick this week. You're not thinking clearly. I think Denver
I never pick Buffalo. I'm picking Buffalo this week.
I think Denver.
Which means the Broncos are going to win.
All right. Well, Chat, thanks for owning that. Come on here. And I know Tommy is probably listening. So appreciate you as always.
Take care, guys. Have a great weekend.